Part 5. Otto. Whilst gazing at the vigilant Otto before him, Subaru let out a long sigh. Telling him he had changed a lot would be precisely describing what was detestable about him. Of course, even were someone to say he hadn't changed, in his current mental state, Subaru would just receive that as irony. However, were someone to directly say you're a different person, then that would be quite hard for him to accept. Up until now, this blunt manner of speaking hadn't even been heard from the people who had come across him that had then been added to the patchwork, or even from the people that had been inside the tower. Subaru, honestly, I'm having quite a hard time handling this. Otto, what do you mean? Subaru, didn't you hear about what I'm doing from Echidna? My memories have vanished into thin air. I've been running amok with my head all loopy, that's the gist of it anyways. Otto, of course I did. I even heard that you're obsessed with trying to get your memories back. Subaru, I don't remember saying as much, but... well, it's a reasonable guess. After all, every single one of you are quite competent. The only incompetent, no good human being is me. Gently running his hand down his left eye, Subaru muttered this as if he was mocking himself. As he looked on at that gesture, Otto gulped. Otto, may I even ask what happened to that eye? Subaru, my left eye. It does look a little bit hazy, but it's no big deal. Though, it does seem like I hit my head a little bit too much when these shocking things started. For how my hair got this way, well, I didn't do anything in particular, it just ended up like this on its own. How laughable. Otto, ha 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 ha, how laughable indeed. Are you satisfied? Subaru, far from it. There's still a long way to go until I am satisfied. I'm so far away from it to the point that it's depressing. Seeing Otto giving him a dry smile, Subaru also responded by showing him a dry smile. Originally, it seemed like Otto and Subaru had been good friends, and, indeed, he could see that. He got this feeling not only from the eyes of Emilia and Beatrice, or from everyone else in the camp, but it felt like something genuine. Emilia, Subaru and Otto-kun always got along so well, they were super heartwarming. Beatrice, well, in essence, Subaru always used to tease Otto, in fact. I get the feeling that nothing much has changed, I suppose. On Otto's left and right, Emilia and Beatrice each voiced their explanations. As he nodded his head at those explanations, Subaru licked his lips and said, well then. Subaru, I've been looking forward to having my first reunion with you for a very long time. Though, I know that you're one of those bastards that become more dangerous the more time I give you. Sorry, but let's bring this to an end now. Otto, first reunion is quite the peculiar way of putting it, but putting that aside, if I think about your goal, wasn't it a failure? Subaru, huh? Leaning forwards, Subaru frowned. And after that, Otto continued his words with a how should I put it? Otto, practically, it was quite the effective move. You found the right moment where everyone gathered in one building and killed them all in one go with a completely unscapable attack. I take my hat off at that. If your opponents get caught up in a natural disaster, they can't strike back at you, regardless of whether they're master swordsmen or a mercenary band. Subaru. Otto, at this rate, wasn't it part of your strategy to have let only Echidna-san escape from the watchtower? You let her escape, so that she'd gather people who knew you through the report she gave. Following that hypothesis, the likelihood of Pristilla being at the center of where everyone would gather was high. There are Watergates here. Subaru, I'm honored to be praised by you. Whilst showing an attitude that he accepted the praise, Subaru rolled his tongue back into his mouth. Rather, it ought to be Otto who should be praised. Otto, who had almost hit the nail on the head, had guessed the truth quite well, including that Subaru had allowed Echidna to escape. Although Subaru, well, to tell the truth, at first it was by chance that Echidna escaped, but then I realized that she'd be useful after she'd escaped. It was because of that I didn't chase after her. Otto, I see. I'd have been surprised if you saw that far ahead. It wouldn't be any leap of the imagination to say that those who lose their memories become quite shrewd. But, cutting off his words there, Otto glared at Subaru. Recognizing the strength of the resolve within his eyes, Subaru put strength into the depths of his own. And, putting himself on guard, Otto continued his words. Otto, in the end, you've completely screwed up your endgame. Subaru, Ive screwed it up? Me? What's the meaning of that? Otto, it's an expression I still don't understand well, but there isn't any meaning to it. You don't get chances like these where you can strike with such an upper hand often. If you'd been earnest about it, then you should have carried out what you set out to do. Subaru, what I set out to do? Otto, you should have aimed straight for Reinhardt-san without getting too greedy. Thrusting his finger out at him, Otto firmly declared that to Subaru. Subaru's eyes flew wide open when he heard that declaration, and taking no note of his astonished face, Otto pressed Subaru for an answer. Otto, weren't you using the books of the dead where the memories of others can be read in? If you're planning to use them to try and get yourself back, Reinhardt-san will become your greatest threat. And if you're aiming at him, then it'll be impossible unless you catch him by surprise. From here on out, you'll have to be on your guard. You'll never get a second chance. Subaru, so, the moment I clamped my fangs around my prey, I shouldn't have let go. Is that what you're saying? Otto, indeed, that's exactly what I am saying. So USH. Subaru KH. Otto. Otto raised his eyebrows at the rather abrupt, strange sound that could be heard coming from Subaru's throat. His reaction showed surprise, bewilderment, and confusion. Subaru wasn't play acting or a trick, his reaction was because of Otto. Such a reaction even may have been quite natural in some respects. Despite having read between the lines of a lot of what had happened, in the very end, he had mistook what his endgame was. Subaru, it's you, Otto, it's you who's misunderstanding. Otto, that's Subaru, the one I was aiming for wasn't Reinhardt. Of course, a lot of hassle would have been saved if he ended up dying amongst the chaos of this flood, but I won't make any pretenses in relying on such a happy accident. Reinhardt's out-of-the-norm characteristics were generally speaking fully known by everyone. He was the sword saint that you always heard about in rumor. The act of killing him would be a Herculean one in any case. It'd be necessary to keep building and building and building a plan to take care of him. Dying to a casual, lucky hit wasn't the sort of death that you could expected from a hero. Subaru, that's why I need to try and look for a way to do that if I am kill that guy. I may weaken him, I may surprise attack him, I may set a trap for him, I may even take a hostage. Of course, if I need to kill him, I will do so. But, he's low priority. Otto, then, was the flood simply to get rid of the people who knew you all at once? For certain, the number of people who know you in the city due to what happened the other day has. Otto had tried to continue by saying skyrocketed. But before he could say it, Subaru had held out his palm. Even Subaru knew what he was trying to tell him. The violence of the witch cult that had took place in the Watergate City Pristula had been scrutinized from every angle. Certainly, in that sense, that had been one of the ideas behind having used the city as well. However, that was a trivial factor compared to the biggest reason why. Subaru's objective behind causing the flood using the Watergate City as his stage was just one thing. His main objective was Subaru, it's you, Otto. Otto, ah. Subaru, this was a way I devised to make sure I could kill you. Anyone else who dies? Well, I guess they're just bonuses. Otto. Otto tensed up as if he didn't understand the meaning behind the objective that Subaru had pointed out. And then, closing his right eye at the astonished Otto, Subaru spun his head around in a circle, looking around at the scene on the rooftop, reflecting the world around him in his hazy left eye. Otto, why, me? Subaru, why did I make such a big deal just for you? It was the embodiment of the utmost caution I have for you. Even having Garfield beside you was added to the plan as a safety measure. Otto. Subaru, just so you know, this ain't something I thought by myself, since I don't trust my thoughts at all. I've only just realized I've been racking useless wisdom out of my useless head. Indeed, Subaru's cunning did not amount to much. No satisfactory thoughts arose in Subaru's mind, with him being naive to the understanding of the rules of the world, disconnected from the secrets of the world, and unfamiliar with the laws of the world. That's why, Subaru, I made sure to consult with them. Otto. Those who surrounded the taciturn, stricken Otto were all of his colleagues that were only visible to Subaru's left eye, and remained forevermore unreflected in Otto's eyes. Emilia, Beatrice, Ram, Roswal, Petra, Frederica, all of his colleagues that made up the Emilia camp surrounded Otto. Looking at each of their faces one by one, Subaru shrugged his shoulders and said, "Isn't that right? Subaru, who is the most troublesome guy from those who know me?" "Otto-kun," Emilia replied. "Subaru, who is the most troublesome guy from those who know me?" "Otto, I suppose," Beatrice replied. "Subaru, who is the most troublesome guy from those who know me?" "That would be Otto, wouldn't it?" "How bothersome," Ram replied. "Subaru, who is the most troublesome guy from those who know me?" "It would be Otto-kun," Roswal replied. "Subaru, who is the most troublesome guy from those who know me?" "Otto-san," Petra replied. "Subaru, who is the most troublesome guy from those who know me?" "It's Otto-sama," Frederica replied. "Subaru, it's unanimous." Even if Garfield joined in with them, he'd probably say the same thing. "Otto, who on earth are you talking to?" "Subaru, even if you're trying to buy time, I should mention that it's pointless. The reason I flooded the city was to kill you. Even you won't find a way to escape from this place, where there ain't even a single damn rat left." This was the reason why Subaru had opened the floodgates and submerged the city in water. Whether it be water dragon, rat, or worm, none of them could get near Otto Suwen. By having been parted from terra firma, he was unable to use the witchcraft he specialized in. Subaru had orchestrated everything to this point, making full use of everyone's knowledge. This, and that, and everything was. "Subaru, I will not underestimate you. I will not underestimate anyone other than me. You're all skilled guys. That's why I will kill you without cutting any corners." "Otto, you are master." After receiving Subaru's powerful declaration of war, a voice interrupted Otto, who had tried to continue what he was saying. The one who landed adroitly onto the rooftop was Shola. Half of her body was soaked in bright red blood. And as she brushed the area around her chest that had become completely stained in blood, she said, "Shola, finally I'm done. Kyaa, he was so stubborn. I legit thought he was immortal with how much I knocked about the stuff inside of his stomach and sent him flying. Subaru, you really did take your time. Did you make sure to finish him off properly?" "Shola, I even crushed his head, maybe. Except for master, human beings die if their heads get crushed, right? Subaru, I don't get why you're excluding me. Even I'll die if I get my head crushed." Shola, Yuri, full of surprises. Frivolously laughing, Shola pushed her shoulders up in disbelief. From Subaru's perspective, the way she thought was quite incomprehensible, but it would be uncouth to meddle into Shola's sense of values. Above all else, she fulfilled the duties that were assigned to her. That was good enough for now. "Subaru, thanks for the hard work, Shola. And now, Shola, I just need to kill Mr. First Choice San, right?" But, was he really an opponent Yahadago to these lengths for? To me, it really seems that. Subaru, if you're going to speak of stuff just as a matter of raw strength or weakness, then even I'd be able to finish you off with one hand. Otto's strength was contained in a part within him which was hard to gauge by Shola's estimation. That was the conclusion he had come to after having pieced the details together from the stories that he'd heard from Emilia and the others. Hearing Subaru's response, Shola replied with a of course in agreement. And on the other side, Otto, with hatred throbbing through the depths of his heart, was looking on at their exchange. Otto no way, being assessed as the most valued in life and having it backfire like this feels the absolute worst. Subaru valued in life? You're misunderstanding it. There wasn't a trace of sarcasm in what Subaru had replied to Otto's words with, he had spoken from his heart. This was the truth Subaru had seen from reading everyone from the Emilia Camp's books. There was no mistaking it. Subaru, you were always the most valued from everyone in the camp, Otto. Otto, eat shit, you phony. To Subaru, who had flashed his teeth and grinned, Otto also flashed his teeth and twisted his face into a terrible grin. Though those words pierced into Subaru's chest quite a bit. In the very next moment, a white flash of light pierced through Otto's body, and their conversation was forcibly brought to a close. Patching together, continuing to form its shape. Patching together, continuing to mold its shape. Patching together, continuing to fill in the colors. Patching together, and continuing towards bringing himself closer to completion. This is as far as you'll go. Natsuki Subaru slowly opened his closed eyelids right as those words came into earshot. Below his eyes, at his feet, Otto's corpse whose top half had been blown away had fallen there. Garfield, who had died in battle, should be floating away somewhere in the water's surface nearby. What Subaru was doing under these circumstances, as terribly hypocritical as it was giving them a silent prayer. Subaru held no grudges against Otto or Garfield. There wasn't any reason for Subaru to hold anything like a grudge against those that he had killed thus far. No, he believed that the original Subaru should indeed keep his grudge against Roswaal, who had been behind considerable crimes, but the current Subaru didn't know the real intentions of Roswaal at that time. Other than these subtle matters of unease, Subaru didn't hold any resentment towards anyone else. The one he always bore hatred for, was himself. He bore hatred for himself, who was not Natsuki Subaru. This phony version of himself was of no use to anyone. It was just the ridiculous Natsuki Subaru that tried to collect the bits and pieces of Natsuki Subaru. It was just the ridiculous Natsuki Subaru that tried to assemble the patchwork. It was just the ridiculous Natsuki Subaru that tried to form himself from patching himself together in one way or another. That's why. Subaru, I'd like to apologize, even to you. Subaru. Turning his head to look back behind him, Subaru gazed ahead of him at Reinhardt, who was standing at the edge of the rooftop. Though he had seen his figure in the memories of a lot of people, there wasn't a single trace of cloudiness in his orderly figure. As a matter of fact, he had even managed to not get any of his clothes wet. How on earth had he achieved that? Subaru, I see, you're out of the norm. Reinhardt, Subaru, did you do all of this? Otto, Garfield, and Subaru, I ordered them killed, if that's what you mean then yes. And not just those two. A whole ton of people in the city became victims in the flood. And all by my doing. Reinhardt, why did you do this? You went to save the people in the city. Subaru, to the watchtower, right? I know. I know all too well. As always, my experiences of it are rather lacking, but I do have some vague gist of it, like as if I'd read a manga summary. Whilst soaking in Reinhardt's blame, Subaru spread out both of his arms towards the city. The city was encroached in the turmoil of having been inundated by the water, but he knew that it had gone through a tough time even before this flood. The scars that had been left due to the violence of the witch cult and such were more warped rather than deep. They had snatched away people's memories, they had changed people into inhuman forms, they had used overwhelming strength to forcibly subdue those who wouldn't follow their will, and they had forced their warped thoughts onto others to make them sympathize with them. It was needless to say the things they did were of the worst nature in the sense that they trampled upon the quintessence of humanity. But, at the same time, it gave him a certain sort of impression. Subaru, their plans are full of holes. I'm guessing they go in thinking they can't lose, and that's why they go rushing in with such dumb-ass plans. The Sin archbishops who possessed supernatural-like strength were all sitting still on their abilities. Hadn't anyone taught those guys? No matter what sort of strength you hold, if you use it the wrong way, then you will be defeated no matter who you are. Whether it be wisdom, numbers, or great talent, you will always be defeated. Subaru, I am not going to challenge you being only partly prepared. Finding a way of making sure I win will only work with the right timing. That's why I will consult them. Reinhardt, consult, is the one deceiving you, the girl beside you? Shola, me. Suddenly piping up, Shola, who was beside Subaru, widened her eyes in surprise. She stared at Reinhardt as she pointed at herself. Shola, me deceiving master? If I could pull such a temptress move, I'd have done it long ago. Master's so sexy like this since he doesn't get caught up in my temptations. At all. Though, you're too sexy for your own good. Subaru, though her position is that of a collaborator, she ain't got the head to be able to deceive. It's not really that I'm being deceived by anyone. No, if I'm forced to say it, I guess it would be a voice from within me. Reinhardt, a voice, from within you. Subaru, the sleeping lion inside of me is seeking the time of its release and is rampaging. After intently listening to Subaru's response, Reinhardt quickly realized that what he was saying was nonsense. Whilst gazing at Reinhardt's eyes, which were clearly dyed in despair, Shola nudged her elbow at Subaru's side, speaking out, a master. Shola, hey, that one's presence is remarkably reddish. Isn't that scary? Subaru, indeed it is. Remarkably scary indeed. It's because that guy's Reed's descendant. Shola, the descendant. Subaru, his children's children, and their children's children, and so on. That's the nuance of it. Shola, Yurg. He can't seriously be related to Reed, right? I wasn't told about this. Shola complained about her disadvantage to Subaru, her facing looking like she'd been ensnared in a kaizo trap. In actuality, the memories of being pummeled by Reed were quite clear for Subaru and the others. TL note, to learn more about the provenance of the term kaizo trap, refer to this link. It was natural that he wouldn't be able to beat Reinhardt, Reed's blood relative, in a fair and open battle as well. Reinhardt, I'm sorry, but let's put an end to your acts of barbarity here. Me being able to do that, is proof of my friendship towards you. Subaru, you say such sad things in spite of us having a relationship where we gate-crashed a wedding ceremony together. Well, though it's me who made you say it, you know, apparently Emilia Tan was delighted. Reinhardt, Subaru, stop already. Just, stop. Subaru. Subaru kept his mouth shut at the mournful echo of Reinhardt's entreaty. Reinhardt's expression was warped into something quite pitiful. From it, Subaru received a sharp pang as if his chest had been torn open. It was the same as Otto and Garfield, where he had no grudge against them. Subaru didn't hold any grudges even against Reinhardt. He knew that he was someone who bore no fault. He knew that he was a benefactor that was undeserving of being blamed. He also knew that he had been a good friend. But despite that, Subaru, I also need the peace inside of you to get back, Natsuki Subaru. That's why I will come to kill you one day. Reinhardt. Subaru, but, not now. Not today. It's a matter for tomorrow's tomorrow. A trace of bewilderment clouded Reinhardt's eyes just after he heard Subaru's proclamation. Reinhardt was trying to settle things here right now. In fact, if Reinhardt wanted to do so, Subaru was in a position where he could close the distance with a single step and cut him down in an instant. Even if Shola made a motion to defend him, it wouldn't really change the outcome. But despite that, Subaru could still say, Assuming Felt managed to take shelter in all of this, I think she'd be somewhere at the edge of the city. And turning towards the direction pointed out by the bald-headed giant, Shola fired a flash of white light towards there. In an instant, Reinhardt held his breath and flew backwards, following after the soaring blow of light at the exact same speed as it. He hadn't done that to kill Subaru, who stood in front of him, but rather to rush towards the faraway building where Reinhardt's master Felt had hidden after having survived the flood, so he could knock down that flash of white light. If you keep something important nearby, then of course, that's the same as exposing your weak points. The same thing applies to the sword Saint Reinhardt, doesn't it? Roswal, who had given this suggestion, let a wicked grin form on his face, and basked in his satisfaction in having outwitted the sword saint. Giving him a look from the side, Subaru took a short breath, and said, "Subaru Shola, let's pull back. That's enough for today." "Shola, okay." Cheerfully lifting her hand, Shola wrapped her arm around Subaru's back. She hoisted Subaru up with unbelievable strength from her slender arms, and with a light bend of her knees, she tried to leap out of the city. But, just before the first jump had began, Subaru turned towards Reinhardt, and said, "Subaru, you are not as omnipotent or superhuman as you think you are. That's why. Subaru, I will absolutely kill you too, Reinhardt." Patching together, continuing to form its shape. Patching together, continuing to mold its shape. Patching together, continuing to fill in the colors. Patching together, and continuing towards bringing himself closer to completion. I want you to tell me once again. What is your name? Amu. Amu Sears. I see, that's a fine name, Amu. What happened now must have been tough. Amu hghhhgh. The red-haired knight, who had seemingly gotten onto one knee to be on the same level as with Amu, spoke those words to her. As soon as she heard those words, the little girl's tensed emotions snapped loose. Tears slowly trickled down Amu's face, and her body began to tremble from the belayed terror that had returned to her. Then, as he looked on at the sobbing little girl, the knight Reinhardt turned his eyes to look at his surroundings and bit his lip. Deep worry was brimming in his chest at the terrible spectacle he saw. Reinhardt. 2 days ago, an incident had occurred at a small village in the northern parts of the kingdom of Lugnica. It took a while for the incident to be known because the village was located in the remote borderlands, and due to that, it lay quite far from both the royal capital and the 5 major cities. Dispatching the knights, including Reinhardt, had ended up being delayed by several days. In that meantime, Amu, who had become the sole survivor in the village, had just been sitting there, holding her knees in loneliness. She'd been there, surrounded by all of the corpses of her family and the people she knew well. Reinhardt Subaru. Reinhardt pensively muttered his name out as he touched the pommel of his dragon sword, which he had holstered by his waist. Given the issues in this kind of incident, there was a good chance that this act of barbarity had been carried out by a witch cultist. However, Reinhardt's intuition naturally saw through to whose hand had carried out this horrendous scene. Reinhardt, the ones who did this. If I'm not mistaking it, it was a man and a woman, right? 2 young people. Why yeah. That's right. But. Reinhardt, but. As she heaved with sobs, Amu choked up her words as she replied to Reinhardt's question. Amu hesitated as Reinhardt awaited her to continue her words. His well-shaped eyebrows were furrowed into a frown. Amu, I don't know who the woman was, but, the man was. Reinhardt, the man was. Amu, I hadn't realized it, but it was like he was talking to someone. Reinhardt. Was there a trace of hesitation when she conveyed that vague information? Amu's explanation lacked conviction in it. But, Reinhardt closed his eyes and breathed out a long sigh at her words. Amu's perception was correct. That man and woman, no, Natsuki Subaru was definitely speaking with someone other than the woman who accompanied him, which was as Amu had seen. Reinhardt didn't know whether that someone was someone he knew, but... Reinhardt, you have my gratitude for providing me this information. The Night Order should deal with this right away. Do you have any relatives other than your family? Amu's fingers gently grasped at Reinhardt's trouser cuff as he spoke to her with kindness. As if frightened of him leaving her, Amu's face had turned to disbelief at her own action. However, given her mental state, that too was natural. She had lost her family and her hometown too. How much suffering awaited her from here on out? If he could be useful in distracting her from her anxiety in the midst of this, then... Reinhardt, all right. I will stay with you until your safety is ensured. So, I want you to rest assured, because no one that wishes you harm will get close to you anymore. Amu's sob, sorry, I'm really sorry. Reinhardt, you needn't apologize. Since, you didn't do anything wrong. Taking her hand, Reinhardt silently thought back to the guy who had caused this horrendous spectacle as he watched Amu once again starting to burst into heavy tears. Reinhardt, are you satisfied with this? Does it fulfill you? What on earth do you see reflected in your eyes? I just don't understand. Subaru. Reinhardt muttered out the name of the person who wasn't here and closed his eyes. The figure which was reflected behind Reinhardt's eyelids was a friend who would eventually come to kill him. That friend would likely go to any means for that. He was a friend that eventually Reinhardt would have to kill by his hand.